real quick, it's my pleasure to introduce today's speaker. Jerry and I met through my old boss, David, actually, and I had the pleasure of hanging out with him at a couple DEF CONs now. And Jerry is one of the most interesting follows on Twitter because he does so much research into vulnerability data, and so I highly recommend to check that out. Is that still going? Okay. He's one of the world's most foremost vulnerability researchers, in my opinion. Yeah. And so, just real quick announcements. If you would like to see Jerry do his very scientific Birds Aren't Real science fair project, there'll be a break after the talks and the Colonel Panic party. So everyone, please put your hands together for Jerry Gamblin.
Is this on? Can you hear me? Okay, good. All right, we're going to go. This is a talk I usually give over about 40 minutes, but I have 20, so we'll see what we can get in. About me, like I said, my name's Jerry Gamblin. If you want to reach out to me, at jgamblin on Twitter, or just jerry.gamblin@gmail.com's about the easiest way to do that. So we're just going to run through how a vulnerability goes from being a vulnerability that a hacker finds to a CVE, because I talk to people all the time and very few of them understand how this actually works, but CVEs affect us every day. So a brief history of CVEs. In 1999 at Purdue University in Indiana, MITRE decided that cataloging all of the vulnerabilities that come out would be a decent use of their time. So they got a federal government contract, and in 2000, they started publishing the CVE list. So who runs the CVE program? In a nutshell, MITRE gets $5 million a year from the U.S. government, Department of Homeland Security, to run the CVE program. So we pay as U.S. taxpayers to have MITRE run this program. It's now a subdivision of CISA, which you've probably heard about if you're in the space, their vulnerability management component. So when you want to think, why are CVEs so far behind and why are they so slow, just remember that 3 government agencies are responsible for making sure they get published on time. So this is how MITRE is set up since 2017. In 2017, MITRE decided that they were too small at only $5 million a year to handle all of the CVEs. So they then decided to let anyone, and I mean anyone, become a CNA and direct publish their own CVEs. So if you're in this room and you want to publish CVEs with very little oversight, you can fill out one form on the MITRE's website. And as long as you have an accessible web page to list the CVEs that you found, you too can publish as many CVEs as you would like. This was taken as of today. Here's where all the CNAs land. 124 of them are based in the U.S., a pretty good majority in Europe, and that's the majority of them. We have a few in China for IoT devices that they're actually pretty decent at getting published. Here are the top CNA assigners ever. Red Hat and Microsoft and Oracle and Cisco. No big surprise on who are pushing those out. But if you look at the bottom here, GitHub is number 10. And we have anybody from GitHub in here? I know they have a good attention. They've been publishing CVEs for about 18 months. So if I show this slide in a couple of years, GitHub and hunter.dev will be at the top. They're making a big change in how CVEs are being published and who are publishing them. So CVEs by the year, before 2015, we were averaging 5,000 CVEs a year. And, you know, it was a good days. If you were running a program, you could look at those yourself, right? You could read 18 or 19 announcements a day and kind of figure out what's going on. Last year, we finally passed 25,000 CVEs a year with an average of just over 55 CVEs published a day. Way too many CVEs for any one shop to keep track of. This year, we're averaging, I just looked this morning, it was 76 CVEs published per day. And I think that that'll be around the number that we'll end up around 75 published CVEs per day. The growth over the year, ever since the big jump in 2017, we've been seeing about 10% year-over-year growth in CVEs. I expect that to continue well into the future. So the CVEs by the numbers. Just yesterday, we passed 200,000 published, non-rejected CVEs. So it's been 23 CVEs a day since 1999 that have been published. And this is just my little dig at CVSS here. The average CVSS score of all time is 7.21. So if you're running a shop that says, I'm going to patch anything that CVSS 7 and above, you're patching half of all vulnerabilities from the get-go. Most people who have those policies don't realize that the numbers are skewed that high, and when you show them the data, they kind of freak out. So let's just talk about the vulnerability lifecycle in the 10 minutes I have left here, because a lot of people don't understand how this works. So if I find, before publication, right, you have two ways of finding a vulnerability in your software. You have the hacker guy who's wearing his hoodie and is going to find it, which probably makes up about 8%, 10% of all CVEs found. The other 90% of all CVEs found are found by the guy on your help desk or on your tech support or on your customer support. They're the ones who find the majority of the vulnerabilities that end up getting CVEs. So like, oh, we're having this problem, poked around at it, here's what happened. And I break these down into two ways. You have the 0 day, which everybody knows about, and that's a bad day, right? Because that means you don't have any forewarning of how you're going to get the CVE published. It's already out on the internet, and your day is very bad. But the other 90% of CVEs that get published falls into what I like to call a friendly day, right? Like, it's external, it's either a bug bounty or your customer support, or it's your development team at some place or your security team, right? Those are the vulnerabilities that you want to find and published. So when you get to 0 day, that was great. You're in incident response mode, right? It's on the internet, probably in bleeping computers, probably on Twitter. You're just trying to do just-in-time patching of that vulnerability. You have no idea how often it's been exploited or what you're going to do, so you're really just running as fast as you can to get something out. That's a really bad day. So if you're on the red side of here and you think, hey, why don't I just drop this, right? Like, why is responsible disclosure so important? This is the reason, right? You give the company who wrote the software 0 time to prepare and to get out a decent patch. When it's a friendly day, the average time between the time it's discovered and when they release the CVE is between 30 and 120 days is normally the average. And I give this talk, and I normally give it to software developers, and they agree with me that they say that they just hide a bunch of CVEs. That, they find something, and they just say, hey, we're not going to patch that, or it's an old software, right? It's EOL. They don't want to release a CVE for something that's getting ready to be EOL'd that they're then just going to have to patch, right? So there's like, hey, this is within a decent time frame. It's within 6 months of being EOL'd. We're just going to slow walk this, and we're not going to patch it. So that's another reason why CVE numbers are down overall. So then you get the vendor advisory. All right, you decided you're going to have a CVE, and you're going to publish a vendor advisory. A vendor advisory can actually come from the product developer, or myself, I can write a vendor advisory for any CVE that I find. The vendor advisory must include these 7 things. A prose description, which is the actual language. This means a short description describing what the vulnerability is. This has to be under 250 words. So if you've ever tried to describe a complicated vulnerability in under 250 words, It is not very easy, and that's why you get some of the great vulnerability descriptions we get. The affected products, the root cause, the impact, and then you have to give it a CVE ID that you've pre-reserved before it is published by MITRE. A good one looks like this. VMware does a great job with their vendor advisories. Microsoft's kind of in the middle. You look at Microsoft's page and you're like, there's not enough data here. They're really terrible on their descriptions. If you ever read a Microsoft CVE description, it's normally like a bug in Microsoft Exchange. All right, thanks for all the information. And then we get companies like this, and they're becoming an issue in the CNA community, and it'll start to become a bigger deal over the next couple of years. This is hunter.dev. It will allow you to file a CVE for any GitHub repo that you say has a bug in it. So you go there today, find something in my GitHub repo that, GitHub org from 3 years ago that I wrote when I was just learning Python or Go, and file a bug on it, and you will get a CVE. And it could even be, and they want to get so many CVEs, so they build up this community that they're even putting CVEs on patch software. So if it's back in a SHA version, they will say, oh, in this SHA version of this repo is a vulnerability, even if you've corrected it, because it's still exposed to the internet. So that's what not to do. But if you want to just be cool and get a bunch of CVEs because red teamers think CVEs on their resumes are job winners, hit up hunter.dev. They will help you out. From there, MITRE publishes. MITRE then takes over and publishes the CVEs. And they provide all of this data, right? They sit down and they add the ID, they add the assigning CNA, the publishing date, the title, everything that was supposed to be in the actual advisory. They have some optional data that they're adding because MITRE and the National Vulnerability Database that is ran by NIST, another government agency, are in the middle of a fight over who's going to own CVEs. So that's interesting to watch from the sidelines. So they're now taking optional data that NVD has previously been the publisher of. The problem with this is that their form that you submit CVEs on looks like your 8th grade computer science project from 1997. It is literally still a CGI form that you fill out and you hit send, and it sends an email in the background to someone. And when they come in at 9 a.m. on Monday in Washington, D.C., they go through and triage all the emails they got over the weekend. Red Hat has released Vulnogram, which is a little better. It's more up to date. So if you know anybody from Red Hat, they do an amazing job of helping push They do a great job of helping push CVE data and to keep it up to date. They do a bunch of free work for that. So I'm always glad that Red Hat does that. So after it gets published, this is what it looks like on the MITRE's website, right? On CVE.org now. It's not very useful. Most people don't go to this website, but this is when a CVE becomes a CVE. So then we wait 72 hours for the next government agency to take over the National Vulnerability Database, right? So the NVD is what adds the data that most security professionals look for. Their role is they have the CPE, the CWE, and the CVSS base score. So a lot of times when you see a CVE and it's new and it doesn't have any of this data, that's because it's not been published for 72 hours. I have another talk that I talk about timing, and you could just think that on a normal day in 2023, when a CNA publishes an advisory, it then takes between 48 and about 62 hours for it to make MITRE. And then after it makes MITRE, it's taking over 72 hours for it to then make NVD. So you're about at 5.5 days between when a CVE is published by, say, VMware, and by when it's in a state that most people would consider it usable. Here's what the NVD website looks like for anybody who doesn't spend 90% of their life there, like me. And post-publication is when it gets interesting, right? This is when everybody goes to work. Traditional vulnerability scanners, after it's published, they can then write their rules. IDS systems can then write their rules to find it if it's network-based. And it's important to understand that those two your Nessus scanner and even your Cisco Snort firewall, between them, they're only getting about 25% of all the vulnerabilities available, right? Because of the way they work. They have to be on the network. You have to be able to write a rule for them. If you do vulnerability management, an OS query-based vulnerability management tool is the future and is what you need to be looking at. Just like David's talk about SBOMs, it's the same concept. You tell us everything that's running on this system, and we will tell you which vulnerabilities you need to fix. So that's where I push that, and that's my that's my soapbox for today. Third-party scanning. That's what I did before Kenna was bought, is that we scored every CVE that came out. I now work for an open source program called the Exploit Prediction Scoring System, which does a baby part of the Kenna model, but it's free. And if you're kind of interested in what's likely to be exploited, please look at first.org for EPSS. There's a ton of data on there. And we actually have an open steering group that we're looking for members who are interested in vulnerability data to join. We meet every other Friday for 30 minutes. So if you want to be a vulnerability data geek, please join that SIG. And then disputes, right? This is what I love about the government agencies. After MITRE and NVD have spent a week deciding what they're going to do with the vulnerability, now, if you don't think it's a vulnerability, after they've published it and it's everywhere, you now get to decide if you're going to reject it, dispute it, or a new one is you could just say this is unsupported and we're not going to patch it. So this is what really gets people, right? Like if I know somebody is going to publish a CVE about my software, I have to wait until it's actually been through NVD to be able to file a rejection claim with MITRE. More government, great government work. And here's what a rejected CVE looks like. Here's what an unsupported CVE looks like. And you're starting to see big companies like Microsoft and Google use more and more of these, where they just say, hey, yeah, it's nice that you found a vulnerability in IE12, but we're not patching it. We don't have a team that supports that anyway. You can have your CVE as your resume filler, but we're not dealing with it. And then you have disputed, where I wish I could just do this at work. They just say, NVD, who's in MITRE, who's supposed to be in charge of this, just says, I don't know. Like, I kind of see where they're coming from, and I see where you're coming from. It might be a vulnerability. It might not be, so I'm just going to throw disputed on here and move on. So that's always great for everyone. All right, so that is all my time today, because we got to let someone else get up here and give a 20-minute talk. But I have time for like 2 questions, 3 questions, if anybody has any. Yes, sir. If you want to find a CVE, go look at the GitHub advisory database. GitHub does a great job at helping people find and file their first CVE. Yes. No. Once you put it in disputed, you can dispute a CVE that's been published forever back, and once it's disputed, they never remove the disputed tag. Oh yeah, for sure. I joke about this, right? Like I work at Cisco is a data science company. We have tons of data. We have firewalls that produce 200,000 logs a minute, if not a second. And I try to tell people that the data set I look at every day is 200,000 records and it's 20 years old. And they're like, wow, that's small, right? So there's plenty of room for CVEs to grow and for there to be tons more of them. So CVEs are here, and they're our best way to be able to communicate across products and other people in any kind of a common language. Yes, I do, actually. Thank you for the question. CVSS 4.0 is coming out in June. So if you're interested, there's also a working group for CVSS 4.0, which should take out a lot of the problem areas where people don't know how to score. So the scoring should be a lot more even across the board. So you can look at first.org too for the CVSS 4.0 SIG. It is also asking for help. So if you're interested in fixing that scoring model, we could use your help there too. MITRE says that MITRE doesn't do, sorry, NVD says that they will support 4.0 by the end of the year. So it just depends on who scores it. We'll be in a situation like we were before where the records will carry both CVSS 3.1 and CVSS 4 scores for the foreseeable future until they have a hard cut and say we're only going to publish 4 going forward. Yes. I have thoughts, but they're not suitable for public discussion. You really need to read and understand the CVSS scoring model if you're going to use that. The base score was never supposed to be a real score for anybody. So if you're not doing a bunch of handwork and calculus to get the CVSS score, using the CVSS score you see on CVEs is a waste of time. Using base CVSS score is a waste of time, and I'm at time, so I need to go. Thank you.